This trip started with one of the best train rides I've ever taken. But sometimes things can be too good to be true. My 3 day trip ended up with a canceled train, a rental car, and a different opinion on what matters most about transportation to me. Welcome or welcome back to Chasing Walkability. I'm Jessie, and today I am bringing you along on this whirlwind journey that was my work trip. Okay, it is currently 4 a.m., and I am about to head out to walk to the MBTA line and get myself to Boston, and then eventually head to Baltimore today via Amtrak. I'm very excited for this trip. It's going to be about a 7 hour, 8 hour trip total. I think it's about 7.5 hours, but I'm excited. It's going to be a good one, and I can't wait to bring you guys along with me. So come on. For this work trip, I traveled from Massachusetts to Baltimore, Maryland, and I planned an entirely core-free trip. Over the last few months, I planned every single step of the way from when I'm going to wake up, when I'm going to pack, to when and where I need to be to get where I need to go. I wanted to find out if trains could realistically replace driving on my work trips. And since being able to work while traveling allows me to relax after I get to my destination, I thought that is a benefit worth researching for. At the end of this video, I will score this trip in 5 categories and answer one simple question. Will I do this again for my next work trip? I will also make an additional note if I feel there would have been any change in circumstances if instead of a solo trip, I was doing this trip with my child. So, let's get started. The day started almost perfectly. I walked about 25 minutes to the local MBTA station and waited for my train. And when I got on, it was a very early ride. I'm talking, I believe it left a little before 5, and everybody else on the train were early morning commuters, people getting to work. There weren't many people getting off to travel. While there was a 5 minute stop where we were delayed, the train did get back up and running pretty quick, and we were at South Station just in time for me to have just under an hour to spare before my next train left. South Station was busy, but it was clean, organized, very easy to navigate. I was also able to go to the restroom without a wait, which was nice, and I was able to have my protein shake before boarding. While I waited, I never had to stop and wonder where I was supposed to go. It is very clear, and while I have been to the station 5 or 6 times by this point, even my first time, I found navigating very easy. And even without my youthful sidekick, nothing was hectic, nothing was out of place. It always just, everything is where it needs to be, and I know where to go to get it. There are 2 boards, one inside that's really large hanging from the ceiling, and the other one is a little smaller outside near where the tracks are, so that you can see arriving and departing trains. You never have to really worry about standing in one spot, even though most people do stand inside. There is a good amount of crowd outside, standing and looking at that board, seeing when their train is arriving or when it is departing. While I waited for my Amtrak train to arrive, something unexpected happened. I was upgraded to first class on the next gen Acela, which was pretty cool because I did put in one of those minimum bids. I think it was like $150. And I did not expect to get it. I thought it's a really low bid. Nobody's going to give me that. But I got it. And I was so excited because I'd never been on first class. So the train was so clean and spotless. The staff were amazing, and the ride was very smooth. Honestly, this was one of the most comfortable travel experiences I've ever had, and being my first class experience in any transportation, it was pretty cool to have that surprise about 30 minutes before boarding that I would have that experience. For the comfort category, I would give this trip a 10 out of 10 because how can you pass up first class, getting a good meal, and just quiet relaxation while I worked? One of the biggest reasons I wanted to test rail travel was productivity. Unlike driving, train travel allows you to get your time back. Yes, the train ride was 6 hours, and a plane would have been about 2 to 3, depending on a layover or not. But flights require you to be there 2 hours early. Now you have to wait for luggage, and then taxi, and then the walk through the airport, TSA security stress. I'll take Amtrak any day over all of those steps because it all ends up adding up to the same amount of time sometimes, or even more. I was able to work most of the trip and get stuff done before I arrived so that I could enjoy being in the city for the evening and enjoy hanging out with my coworkers. I was even able to make a few calls for work. While the signal was not perfect, I was able to make those calls and finish about 4 hours of work and still have time to eat without working and just relax and enjoy the scenery. The only major service interruption happened around New York, which I understand because we were literally in a tunnel. So for productivity, I do give it a 9 out of 10 because the only issue was that slight interruption in having any Wi Fi. By the time I arrived in Baltimore, the entire experience had exceeded my expectations. Penn Station was not very easy to navigate for me. I got off the train while I saw some stairs. I did not see any signs leading to me to where I needed to go, and all I could think of was what if I couldn't walk, or what if I had a stroller? Were there elevators? Now, while Google tells me that there is elevators on the platform, how would I know this as a first time visitor to this stop? Because I saw no signs. And maybe there were signs, but there were none right where I got off, and there were none as I walked towards the stairs. Getting around was possible by following another woman who got off with me, and I followed her while carrying my suitcase, very heavy suitcase, up the stairs, since again, I didn't see elevator signs or ADA access notifications anywhere. As a parent, that was a bit stressful because I know if I have my stroller with me, I would have had to pull out my phone and try to figure out where I need to go or find a staff member and say, hey, where is the elevators? And while there were no staff members out on the platform, I would have just been a little more flustered because now I have a small child with me while I'm in a place I've never been before. At this point, I was convinced I would choose the train over driving every time. Even though the arrival was a bit hard to navigate, I was still very happy with my trip overall, and I had no issues yet. So for car-free functionality, 10 out of 10, absolutely had no concern about getting to and from point A to point B. It was an amazing experience. The morning of my departure going back home was a fantastic morning, but then a few hours before my departure, while I was finishing packing up, everything changed. My train was canceled, and at first I got really stressed. I'm in an unfamiliar place and I need to check out in about an hour. Not only that, but Amtrak never notified me. Not a text, not an email, not the app sending me a notification, the same way they notified me 2 days earlier when my train was 35 minutes delayed while I was sitting on the train. I found out that Amtrak was canceled because of a Reddit thread. I saw somebody post in the Amtrak Reddit area that there was a fire on the tracks in the New York City station, and something told me check the app. I was mad at the moment, but I figured I could get rebooked or find another way on the plane, possibly. Biggest issue for me was I was calling and my calls were not being answered because of the high volume. I could assume thousands of people's rides were canceled. So I had to rush pack, make sure I didn't leave anything behind, and an hour before I had planned to actually check out, I had to drop off my key and head back to Penn Station. I was a bit stressed because now I had to refigure out when the bus is coming. And as I'm looking at that, the bus was going to be there in 2 minutes. So then I had to rush out of the hotel, rush across the street, walk up the road a little to get to the bus. And then the bus thankfully was a few minutes late. So that was a little more helpful. And I was a little less stressed at that point. And I was trying to figure out in this time what I needed to do. And as I stood in line, a little stressed and on the phone with my mom, I realized I would not be getting home by train. And with plane prices being over $1,000, leaving in 10 hours, or about $400, leaving in about 3 hours, and taking 19 hours for me to get home, I felt so trapped. But then I calmed down while waiting in line, got my refund, and realized I'm not across the ocean. I am 7 hours from home, stateside. This is not going to be a big issue. There are many other ways I can get.
Okay, today did not go as planned. My train was canceled. Yes, canceled. So now I'm in a rental car, and after goodness, a lot of stress and 5 different rental calls, I finally found a place that hurts that has a rental car that I can take. It was a very unreasonable expense. It's going to be about $700 for me to rent the car that I can't return till Monday because they're closed on the weekend. So stressful, but not impossible. Still making the trip back home. In probably the worst way ever in a car.
This trip completely changed how I think about transportation, and it did change how I will plan in the future, especially if I have my son with me. I had to call about 5 places to find one that had a car available for me to rent. And then I had to get a taxi to drive me to the car rental place, and then $600 later, I had a rental car to go home. And yes, $600 for the weekend because they insisted I could not return my car on a Saturday. I could. To me, comfort matters, productivity matters, good stations matter, but reliability matters so much more. And that canceled train and maybe the next train might leave in 5 hours, but maybe it won't rebook, was not good enough for me. Well, I found my way home and I did make it home safely. It threw me off and it really messed with my mood for that day. And I will say, for reliability, I'm giving this trip a 3 out of 10. It started fantastic, everything was on time, but the way back was just so unorganized and it kind of caught me off guard. And that does kind of change the car free score too. Could I realistically complete this trip without a car? Yes, absolutely. Getting to Baltimore without a car was amazing. But getting home, I had to use a car. It is possible I planned for it, but this time I was unable to, and that was frustrating. So for this trip, because it is trip dependent, the car free functionality is now a 5 out of 10. This leaves us with a final scorecard of navigation, comfort, productivity, reliability, and core-free functionality, giving us an overall score of 7.2 out of 10. Adding my mom bonus of would this have done better or worse with a child with me, I will say this trip would have probably been worse if I also had to try and plan and navigate around with a child. I didn't have a car seat with me, so I would have really struggled of having to find a place to rent one or buy one so that I can have my son come with me in the rental car. So I'm going to bump it down to a 7 out of 10 because everything was so fantastic, with the exception of the reliability and the car free functionality. This trip showed me both the best and the worst parts of rail travel, and these are some things I had never experienced before. While everything works, I would choose the train every single time because it was so perfect. It was more comfortable, it was more productive, and honestly, far less stressful than driving in traffic on 95. But one cancellation due to track fire really did change my experience, and that is why reliability ended up being the most important category in this trip and in this whole transit review. The train itself was incredible. The system around it still has a lot of work to do, and that is no secret to anybody around. If you are interested in more reviews, more trips, and more walkability thoughts, please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one.